on, friends? I'm Sean Pierce Johnson, and welcome to this week's episode of Stomp Box Saturday, where today on the Stomping Block, we have Chase Bliss's Mood Mark II. And I can remember back to the original email that I got from Joel when Mood Mark I was coming out. And he's like, hey man, we got something a little different coming your way. Hope you dig it, and just let me know what you think. Well, that thing arrived in its pink, purple, red, and green enclosure, and for a guy who mostly plays like harder rock styles of music and plays mostly black guitars and wears black clothing, although this is navy blue, it was a bit of a stretch for me. I was wondering, is this really gonna work its way into my vocabulary? Well, sure enough, Mood ended up blowing my socks off and doing things that I had nothing else in the collection that did. There's a lot to unpack before we get into hearing the sounds, so let's go ahead, talk about the controls and the features, and we can move quickly and swiftly on to hearing how it sounds. But before we get to the control rundown, I just want to say, if at any point during this video you find yourself learning something or enjoying yourself, please do click that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And stay tuned to the end of the video, because I'm going to tell you how you can win a Mood Mark II of your very own. Now, if I had to guess, the most requested feature for an updated Mood would go something like this. Hey, you guys should make stereo version. Well, guess what? Mood Mark II is indeed full left-right stereo. Just like Generation Lost Mark II, this has TRS jacks on the in and out, so that you can either use a TRS cable or a Y breakout cable in order to go left-right in, left-right out, and out to amps or whatever your rig is going to be. Whatever you remember from Mark I Mood is here on Mark II. It's the same set of controls on the face of the pedal for the wet channel, the micro looper, and the master section. You have your wet channel on the left and your micro looper channel on the right. The wet channel is controlled by the time knob, the modify knob, and a three-way toggle switch underneath. It allows you to select between reverb, delay, and slip. Three different effects that really are in a class all their own. The micro looper channel was the real surprise for me in the original Mood, and it's just as good here in Mark II. You control it with the length knob, the modify knob, and the three-way toggle switch underneath. Of course, engaging and disengaging the micro looper with the foot switch at the bottom. And then we have our master section, which is controlled by mix, clock, and the three-way toggle switch underneath the clock. The clock, this is the thing that sets Mood apart from the pack, and back when the first one came out, I'm pretty sure no other pedal really gave you as much control over the clocking of the time-based effects as Mood did. It affects so much about the pedal. Everything from the tonality of the effects that are produced by it on both the micro looper and the wet channel. It affects the tone, the amount of time the micro looper can sample, the fidelity, all sorts of things that make this a lo-fi and ambient player's best friend. Now, those are just the controls that you see on the face of the pedal, but there's far more to Mood Mark II than meets the eye. If you press and hold down on both foot switches for both the wet channel and the micro looper channel, you can turn any of the 6 knobs or flick any of the 3 toggle switches and access other parameters for tone shaping. And of course, we have our bank of dip switches on top of the pedal. Now, this is really just like with Generation Lost, where I feel that this Mark II version really ups the ante, because there's a lot more flexibility to it once you start switching those things on and off. In addition to being able to engage a mono in stereo out mode, you can also engage spread, which sort of widens the stereo field, but produces some really cool audio artifacts in this new wider stereo spread. But my favorite thing is the fact that we not only have access to the Mark II effects, the refined effects of this new version, we also have the classic mode, which gives us all that perfectly imperfect craziness of the original Mood in this new format. So all of you who are clamoring for those degraded and lo-fi and super resonant and ringy kind of effects from Mood in stereo, you have it right here with Mark II. Now, we've already front-loaded this video with a ton of talk about Mood Mark II, so it's finally time to get down to hearing it. But before we do, I want to let you know what the guitar rig is that you're hearing today so that you know full transparency of what's going on. Any guitar that I plug in, starting with the main Les Paul, is going into a pedal board that I have down on the floor. Now, that is controlled by my Gig Rig G2, simply for bringing in and out different effects in true bypass loops, so not too much is getting in the way of what Mood is doing. I have things like an Orange compressor, a Voodoo Lab Giggity, a Boss FZ1 Wazacraft Fuzz, and a Rev G3, and a Walrus Audio Fundamental Distortion. Then out of that pedal board, we're going stereo into Mood Mark II. Out of Mood Mark II, going stereo into a CXM 1978, and then out stereo of CXM into my Walrus Audio Mako ACS1 amp and cab sim. I'm running a Fender style amp on the left side and a Marshall style amp on the right side. Full spread, hard left, hard right. All right, now let's get down to hearing the wet channel sounds, starting with the reverb. What we're gonna do is we're going to explore the Mark II sound, then compare it to Mark I, and then go back to Mark II and engage spread. And periodically we'll turn the knobs and see how they interact, because that's basically the MO of Mood. It is an entirely interactive pedal that, although it may not always give you the same thing twice, is never at a loss for inspiration and exploration. Spread with the reverb sort of turns the reverb into what I would refer to as a scatter echo. Now you're thinking, it's a reverb, Sean. It's not an echo. Well, reverb essentially is random blended multiple reflections. Numerous echoes being bounced back around you at various different delay times that essentially get smudged together. And that's really what you're doing with the reverb. The effect is much more apparent if I turn the clock up and turn the modify down. The modify on the reverb mode is gonna smudge those repeats together. I'll just play a couple notes so that you can hear what that sounds like. You can tell by my little dance, the effect of spread on the delay is a ping pong effect. And it's not quite as extreme as some of the other ping pong effects that I've heard, but that's perfectly fine with me. But at the same time, it really has a cool way of being able to sort of get the echoes out of the way of the dry signal coming in. So to kind of give you an idea of what I mean by that, I'm gonna go ahead and turn on a crunchier sound, and I'm gonna use the fundamental distortion for this. Now turn on the delay. We can turn down the modify in order to have less feedback. And the time, although it is affected by the time knob, that length is actually affected by the clock. So for example, if I were to take the clock back here, say about roughly 10 o'clock on the dial, I haven't touched the time knob, but our delay time got a little bit longer. So we're gonna have to kind of find that delay time setting that really works for what we want.
Later that same evening.
Now I stacked that on top of CXM 1978 to sort of fill out some ambience, but let me play that sound for you again without the reverb. But if you listen real carefully, you'll notice that there's a little bit of a delay, a little latency between the original note and the effect. If I just play this D real quick, see, it doesn't come on right away. But depending on where you set the modify knob, which is how you adjust the pitch of that auto sample, it sort of helps the original note get heard and then helps create this cascade of notes, which you can then set with the time knob. Of course, that's also connected to the clock with the tonality of it. Again, super interactive pedal that you're just gonna have to play with in order to find the sound that you want. Now, Chase Bliss says that this is a panning effect, but I would go ahead and call it something else. I'd call it a swirling effect, because when you're seated, which I'm not right now, but when you're seated in a way where you can hear the left-right spread very clearly, it has this way of traveling around your head. It doesn't feel like it's going from side to side. Instead, it feels like it's swirling around you. But anyway, this is not the only thing that you can do with it. If you want, you can take the slip mode and turn it into sort of your normal pitch shifter kind of thing. If we go ahead and take the time knob down all the way, and then use the clock knob to sort of find that point where it's playing right at the same time as you're picking the note.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
You know, if we combined this with, say, the Voodoo Lab Giggity for a little extra dirt, and maybe, I know, how about we get a little swirly with some phaser? It kind of like fakes an electric organ sound, which I think is always kind of fun to play around with. And now that we've checked out all three wet effects on the Mood Mark II, we can go ahead and check out the micro looper side of Mood Mark II. Now I warn you, Mood Mark II is always listening to your sound. It never stops recording, in a sense. You essentially let it know when you want the loop to start playing back. So this isn't your traditional looper, but there's some new things in Mark II that put it more in line with a traditional looper. So let's check it out, starting with tape. Tape is the most basic looper mode on the micro looper, and it essentially works just like any other looper. It's just not recording nearly as much time, unless you know how to play with it. The real key to the micro looper, especially when it comes to the loop mode for tape, is the clock control. Clock is not just about the sort of fidelity of the sound that you get out of Mood. It also affects things like delay time, reverb time, and loop time. So I have it turned up pretty high, but let's go ahead and do the same thing, but I'm just gonna turn the clock back to noon. You can hear very clearly that more of what I played before I hit the foot switch for the looper is starting to come through in this loop. So let's play around with the clock. I just went one step down and I'm already like, Mood is a composition tool. Now the time in the tape mode is essentially pinpointing how much of that tape loop that you just recorded is going to end up getting played back, with the counterclockwise throw being shorter portions and clockwise being longer portions. And then the modify is a tape speed, with counterclockwise being reverse playback and clockwise being forward playback. 90% of the time, this is the looper mode that I'm using because it is so familiar. But this then leads me to be able to talk about something that the Mood Mark II improves on with the micro looper. You can actually overdub with your loops by pressing and holding down on the foot switch for the micro looper channel while you're playing what you want done on top of the loop that you've created. So for those of you like me who are much more straightforward rock musicians, the tape mode is going to be the one that you stick to the most. But these other ones are just as adventurous. So now let's go to the one that I usually end up experimenting the most with, and that is stretch mode. personally can't think of a better descriptor for what stretch mode is doing to your sound than what's in the field guide for Mood Mark II. Allow me. Stretch mode lets you zoom in and explore the details of your loop, spreading short phrases into sprawling epics. It does this by chopping your loop into slices and moving through them at a speed of your choosing. Interesting, huh? So length sets the size of the slices. Higher settings will have more clarity and feature repeating phrases, while lower settings will be more blurry and grainy. Counterclockwise of noon is where you will find classic time stretching sounds. And then the modify is the playback direction, with the noon setting being the most stretched. And then counterclockwise is reverse. Forward is clockwise. But this does give us a good place to look at combining the micro looper channel with the wet channel. So let's go ahead and record a similar kind of loop. I'm gonna put the clock about here. I'm just gonna start with all knobs at noon in the stretch mode. Envelope is as it implies. It is a looper that the playback and its smoothness, I suppose you could say, is affected by an envelope, with modify setting the sensitivity of that envelope. And then the length knob is setting the size of the slices that then play back when you trigger that envelope. Really a very fun thing that becomes this interactive performance tool. Now this also gives us an opportunity to utilize the clock to increase the amount of time that is recorded in the loop. I deliberately did it shorter this time. So let's go ahead and turn it back to noon, which, let's reference our field guide once more. 12 o'clock on the clock dial is going to be 12K, our resolution, with 5.3 seconds of playback and loop time. another layer to the Mood Mark II than what you see on the face of the pedal. And that's no more apparent than when you start combining the wet channel and the micro looper channel together. These extra features really help give you more tone shaping options and also make Mood Mark II a much more powerful version of its previous iteration. The simplest secondary control, yet my most needed, is a tone control, something to be able to tame harsh high end. Well, by pressing and holding down on both foot switches and turning the modify knob on the wet effects, we are able to engage a high cut filter on those effects, which I think makes for a very useful control. By pressing and holding down on the foot switches and turning the time knob on the wet channel side, you can adjust the stereo width of the effect. Now I have spread engaged, so maybe that'll help give more of an apparentness of the stereo spread. And we'll go ahead and make it as tight as possible and as wide as possible. I'll start with it right in the middle. But my friends, that is the Chase Bliss Mood Mark II. And boy howdy, this is absolutely a refined and more powerful version of one of my favorite Chase Bliss pedals ever. And really, the biggest thing I can say to give Mood Mark II my seal of approval is the fact that it is just as inspiring, and if not more so, than its predecessor. And that's my number one thing with pedals, or any piece of guitar gear for that matter. If it's getting me in the creative mood, if it's inspiring me to create music and come up with new song ideas, I'm all for it, and it makes it so much easier for me to tell you to go seek one out. Now, if you've made it through to the end of this video, you get the reward of finding out how you can win a Mood Mark II of your very own. Joel and the Chase Bliss crew have been kind enough to provide serial number 4,999 for me to give away to all of you watching. And it's very easy to enter. Just go to SeanPierceJohnson.com/giveaway. There's a link in the description box down below, or you can click the card in the top right corner of this screen. And all you have to do is follow the steps on that page. That's just 3 steps, and it's not going to take you a whole lot of time. Now, that also signs you up for my email club, where I send links to videos just like this direct to your inbox, but you're permanently entered into any future giveaways that I announce here on the channel. So you're not only entered to win the Mood Mark II, but what's going to come next month, which I'm not going to tell you about just yet. Thank you all so much for spending part of your day with me. It has been an absolute blast showing Mood Mark II off to you all. Until we see each other again, my friends, I'm Sean Pierce Johnson, wishing you all watching great tone, great health, and of course, happy stomping. Cheers, friends. God bless.